what's going on? Sir Blackson97 here, back with another deck profile. Today we have our annual Dream Mirror deck profile. This time we're bringing back the Bestials once again, but also including Tearlaments. And since we're running 60 cards in the main deck, it's also home to That Grass Looks Greener. So in total, this is the Dream Mirror Tearlaments Bestials Grass deck profile. Whew! It's quite the mouthful. Since we got a lot of graveyard ground to cover and a lot of milling to do from the top of the deck, let's go ahead and kick things off, starting with, as per usual, our field spells. 3 copies of Dream Mirror of Terror, which is home to our dark attribute Dream Mirror monsters, and 3 copies of Joy, which is where our light attribute Dream Mirror monsters get most of their good effects off of. We'll cover them more in depth as we cover the main deck monsters for Dream Mirrors, but for the most part, 3 of each is good to go. There are plenty of ways to get access to them, and just also activate them from the deck. Kicking off our extra deck, 2 copies of Oneros Earl King, 2 copies of Oneros Tormentor. As always, Dream Mirror monsters have light and dark counterparts. Both of their effects kind of just play off each other, and also depending on the field spell that is present. Both of them require 2 Dream Mirrors with different attributes. They also treat themselves as their counterpart attributes, Earl King also being dark, while Tormentor is also light attribute. We'll start with Earl King. If another monster you control is tributed, which is what Dream Mirrors are going to do 9 times out of 10. Target and destroy a card on the field, and if it's ever destroyed by an opponent's card, it can float into a Dream Mirror monster from the grave. What's handy is Tormentor plays right into this. If you have Dream Mirror of Terror on the field, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can negate that effect. And if Joy is in the field zone, you can just tribute it to special summon an Earl King from extra deck in defense position. So a nice way to float back into Earl King once Tormentor gets blown up, and just continue again destroying cards and floating back into each other. On top of course having your monster negate. What's nice about Earl King is it doesn't really matter which field spell is present. You'll still be able to get the floating back into another Dream Mirror. For our Tearlaments, we have 1 Rule Kalos, 1 Kaleido Heart. This deck functions a lot better if Kit Kalos is present, so if she ever comes back to 1, absolutely put her in along with a copy of Instant Fusion. But since we don't have her unlimited or even just limited in any capacity, she's still banned, we're running King of the Swamp as kind of a nice little stand-in substitute. So if you still need to make your fusion plays, consider adding the little blob monster to help out. Why does that matter? Because Rule Kalos needs Kit Kalos plus a Tearlaments, and Kaleido Heart needs Rhino Heart plus 2 Aquas. Rhino Heart's fully unlimited, so that doesn't bother us too much, but again, just nice ways we can substitute for our specifically named fusion materials. Start with Rule Kalos. Other Aquas get Battle Protection. When a card or effect is activated that includes the effect to special summon a monster, negate and destroy, and then send a Tearlaments card from hand or field to grave. If this fusion summon card is ever sent to graveyard by a card effect, she can special summon herself back. Same thing applies with Kaleido Heart, except he can't be used as fusion material, so even though he's a fiend and doesn't really flesh out with the Aquas of the deck, it does give him nice protection from Super Poly from stuff like Starving Venom or Aerial Eater. If it's ever special summoned or another Aqua is sent to graveyard by card effect while he's on the field, we can target and destroy it, or target and shuffle into the deck a card our opponent controls. If he's ever sent to the graveyard by card effect himself, you can special summon him back, and then he Foolish Burials a Tearlaments. Very nice. Tearlaments pretty much always want to be sent to the graveyard by card effect, either by stuff like Foolish Burial or just by any other means, as it's a nice way to get their fusion plays going, so this just plays right into it. Plus he looks super cool and menacing. 2 copies of Starving Venom. We also run just regular polymerization, so we can at least make some plays, but splashing in Super Poly isn't a bad idea either. 2 dark monsters on the field that aren't tokens. If he's fusion summoned, he gains attack equal to an opponent's special summon monster until the end of the turn. We can also take a level 5 or higher monster opponent controls, and Starving Venom will copy its original name and effect, which is pretty cool. Not only are we stealing attack, we're also just stealing everything from them. And if this fusion summon card is destroyed, we can basically Raigeki our opponent's special summon monsters. So, if we aren't allowed to steal their effects or attack, we can just blow them up ourselves. Very handy. Garura, just in case we need to make a stall play here. Basically just using Tearlaments if our Grass Mill isn't very good. 2 monsters with the same type and attribute, but have different names. Does double battle damage to our opponent, but if it's ever sent to the grave, we can draw a card. This is just to kind of stall out so we can get access to grass, hopefully as quickly as we can. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a Sir Blackson deck profile without some obscure fusion. This one just not really obscure, but more of the oddball Dragoon inclusion. Bestials and Starving Venom come in handy here. And, of course, we are running the Blob Monster, so he can also substitute as Dark Magician. Since we aren't using any normal monsters for the material, we don't get access to its target and destruction effect, and we also won't be able to burn our opponent for that monster's original attack. What we can do is protect ourselves from card effect destruction and targeting, and whenever our opponent activates a card or effect, we can discard a card to negate and destroy, and then give Dragoon 1,000 attack. As if he wasn't terrifying enough on his own, now he's just getting stronger and stronger. Moving on to the link section, we have Proxy F Magician. 2 effect monsters during the main phase, we can just fusion summon using materials from our field. And if a fusion monster is ever summoned to a zone it points to, we can also special summon a monster with 1,000 or less attack from the hand. Which does fit King of the Swamp, so we can get more fusion substitutes that way, if we don't want to use his discard effect. SP Little Knight, 2 effect monsters. If she's link summoned using an extra deck monster, we can target a card on the field or in either grave and banish it. Our monsters don't get to attack directly this turn, though. When our opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, we can target 2 face-up monsters on the field, including 1 we control, and banish both until the end phase. It's a nice way to mess with our opponent's field and grave, and also just continue banishing and messing with more of their stuff on the field. Nightmares, we're running 1 Phoenix, 1 Unicorn, at least 2 monsters with different names. If they're ever link summoned, we get discard a card to then apply a unique effect, and if they were co-linked when that effect activates, we get to draw a card. Phoenix, in addition to passively giving battle protection to co-linked monsters, destroys a spell and trap for the unique effect. Unicorn lets us get an additional draw during the draw phase for every different named Nightmare monster that is co-linked, and also targets and shuffles a card back into the deck for the discard effect. And of course, it wouldn't be a Dream Mirror profile without Boral Sword Dragon. Super old school variants of this deck used to run this guy. Obviously, you don't go into him too often with the field materials, but Bestials can kind of help cover ground with getting all the materials out, and some of your Dream Mirrors can fill up the field quite often. So it's not impossible to put them out on the field, just unlikely. 3 or more effect monsters can't be destroyed by battle, and quick effects. Once per turn, we can target an attack position monster and put it to defense position. Boral Sword gets to make a second attack during each battle phase this turn. Our opponent doesn't get to activate cards or effects in response to the battle change. And when it does attack, it basically gets a Riryoku effect. We have our opponent's monster's attack, and then Boral Sword gets that amount that it was halved. So a nice way to pretty much guarantee we're dealing 3,000 damage. Since we're about to move into the main deck, it's time to cover our fancy field spells. Terror, much like Joy, during the end phase, we can banish them to activate their counterparts. Each time our opponent special summons a monster, we burn them for 300. We just need a Dark Dream Mirror monster to get that effect going. 3 copies of Joy. Our opponent doesn't get to target our Dream Mirrors with attacks or card effects, except for the one with the highest level. We just need a light attribute Dream Mirror monster for that effect to apply. The light Dream Mirror doesn't need to be the one with the highest level, it just needs to be present for that effect to go off. Just something to consider. And now it's time to dive into the Dream Mirror arsenal of our deck. 3 copies of Neroid Trader, absolutely max out on him, and 2 copies of Dream Mirror Neroid Disciple. You can max out on her as well, but at the very least 2 does come in handy. We'll start with Trader. If he's summoned, we get to add a Disciple from deck to hand, and we could also make his attribute become light if needed, just for those fusion plays. We can tribute one other Dream Mirror monster to take a Dream Mirror monster from deck with a different level than that monster that we tributed, and then add one of the field spells listed on it, and then special summon that monster in defense position. What's nice is a lot of the other Dream Mirrors get their effects when summoned off of a Dream Mirror card, so this is a great way to, again, just get stuff from deck, get our plays going, and also search for a field spell that they can tag out from. Disciple, if we have a Dream Mirror monster on the field, it's a free special summon. Then we can choose to make her dark, again, just to help out with those fusion plays. if it's special summoned by the effect of a Dream Mirror monster. If Joy is on the field, we can bounce back a spell or trap our opponent controls. And after that, if Terror is on the field, we can draw a card, then shuffle a card from our hand back into the deck. Plays well into the grass, again, if we just want to draw into stuff and hopefully get to grass as soon as possible. And if we have anything we'd prefer to just keep in deck for the mill, we can also shuffle those back as well. But definitely max out on Nearby Trader. That's what you're going to dedicate your normal summon to, as he will absolutely get your plays going. He does also have 1,000 attack, so Proxy F Magician can also special summon from hand. So that's also something worth considering. Our next pairing is 3 copies of YuGiOh Sprite, 2 copies of YuGiOh Mara. It's kind of worth covering how Dream Mirrors really work, and that is obviously when they're special summoned by the effect of a Dream Mirror monster, they apply their unique effects. But what also is cool is during the main or battle phase, if a different counterpart field spell, so Terror in the case of your light attributes, and Joy in the case of your darks, if that is present on the field, they quick effect tribute themselves to special summon their specific name counterpart from deck. So in this example, if Dreamer of Terror is present, YuGiOh Sprite will tag out into YuGiOh Mara, and vice versa if Dreamer of Joy is present. YuGiOh Sprite, for her unique effect, she can add a Dream Mirror card from deck to hand that includes spells and traps, so we get a nice little variety off of the search. And YuGiOh Mara does the special summoning from hand, so again, more swarming, which considering that it does treat as a Dream Mirror monster's effect, special summoning more Dream Mirrors, we can just continue our chain of effects and continue more stuff like removal, protection, and revival, which is very nice. Next, we have 2 copies of Morpheus Black Knight, 1 Morpheus White Knight. In addition to their tag out effects, Morpheus Black Knight, if summoned by a Dream Mirror monster, lets us target and destroy a card on the field. And Morpheus White Knight lets us activate this effect. White Knight cannot be destroyed by Valor card effects this turn. So kind of like the polar opposite. Gives nice little protection to himself, whereas Morpheus Black Knight will just remove stuff that we don't like. Again, it destroys cards, so we can also take care of our opponent's spells and traps in addition to monsters. Moving on to the Tearlaments and Aqua section. 3 copies of King of the Swamp. Substitutes for any specific name fusion material. The rest have to be correct. Considering all of our fusion monsters just name one specific monster and the rest being generic, pretty much plays right into King of the Swamp. He's also an Aqua, so he also comes in handy with just making fusions altogether. Kit Kalos would also take an Aqua monster, but also Kaleido Heart will take 2. So it's pretty easy to go into them based off of him. He can also substitute for Rhino Heart. So again, he just plays into the deck super well. We can also discard him to add a polymerization from deck to hand. We're maxing out on polymerization just so we can guarantee we're always seeing a polymerization to make like stuff like Dragoon, Starving Venom, or just anything else we need at that given time. But Tearlaments will also fusion summon on their own, which again just plays into him being Aqua type. For our one-off Dream Mirrors, all of these are limited, but if they ever go up on the ban list, absolutely max out on them wherever you can. 1 Shiren, 1 Havness, 1 Merly. They all have the effect to mill the top 3 cards of our deck to grave, usually with some other condition attached to it. But what's also cool is universally, if they're ever sent to the graveyard by card effect, either being milled out or just sent for like fusion material based on polymerization, they'll then take fusion materials from hand, field, or grave, place them on the bottom of the deck, and then fusion summon a fusion monster. Pretty much this is how we get into our Tearlament fusions, just by taking all those materials and just putting them back onto the deck. Obviously, with something like that, Grass Looks Greener, you're not guaranteed all the time, but a 20-card mill is definitely going to help you get a lot of stuff in the grave to make those fusion plays. Again, if Kit Kalos was here, we'd be able to do it a lot faster with a lot less resources and get a lot more out of the Grass Looks Greener mill. But we got to play with the hands we're dealt. So Shiren, during the main phase, we can just special summon her. Not for free, we just need to send a monster from hand to grave, so it doesn't need to be Tearlaments. But if it is, that would just icing on the cake. We would just double up on our effects. Then we send the top 3 cards of our deck to grave. Havness, when our opponent activates a monster effect on the field. Quick effect, she's a free summon. And then we send the top 3 cards from deck to grave. And then Merly, anytime she's summoned, it's a top 3 mill from deck to grave. She's also a level 2, so she does splash into sprites that way, so you can easily revive her, move her around, and continue to send cards from deck to grave. 3 copies of Rhinoheart. This is one of the few that is unlimited. And what's also cool is he's a warrior, so he has a Rhoda target, which is very handy. If he's ever summoned, we can Foolish Burial a Tearlaments card from deck to grave. If he's ever sent to the graveyard by card effect himself, we can special summon him. He'll banish when he leaves the field. And if we do, we can send a Tearlaments card from hand to grave. So a nice way to get rid of our spells and traps from hand if we want to get their effects off, but also just Foolish Burial monsters, or just send them from hand to grave as well. And again, continue our fusion plays from there. But definitely max out on him, or at the very least 2 copies. But again, he's a Rhoda target, so you can play as many as you feel comfortable with. 2 copies of Tearlaments Cashier. It's unfortunately a Psychic, not an Aqua, but it still works really well with the deck, and it does a lot of milling, so beggars can't be choosers. During the main phase, quick effect, she's a free special summon. We just need to banish a Cashier or Tearlaments card from our hand or grave. If she's summoned, it's a top 3 mill from either player's deck to grave. And if she's sent to the graveyard by card effect, it's a top 2 mill from deck to grave from our deck. 9 times out of 10, you're going to choose your deck, but it does give you the option to mill 3 from your opponent as well. But if we play our cards right, no pun intended, we can get it at least 5 cards milled just off of Tearlaments Cashier. Rounding out our monster lineup in our Bestial engine, this is primarily how we get to Dragoon. 3 Lubellion, 1 Magnum Hut, 1 Druid Swarm. Lubellion, we can summon him from hand or grave by tributing a level 6 or higher Dark Dragon. We can also send him from hand to grave to just Rhoda out and search for other Bestials. And if he's on the field during the main phase, we can place a branded Continuous Spell or Trap from deck face up onto our field. So stuff like Branded Beast and Branded Regained. And for our one-offs, we got 1 Magnum Hut, 1 Druid Swarm. Both are limited, so if they ever do move up in the ban list, similar to your stuff like Merle, Havnus, and Shiren, definitely consider bumping these guys up as well. Basically how they work is they target and banish a light or dark monster from either grave. It becomes a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. And if Magnum Hut is special summoned, during the end phase of this turn, we can grab a dragon from deck or graveyard to hand. Druid Swarm, if it's ever sent from field to grave, it can target a special summon monster opponent controls and just send it to the grave. Nice way to get around those pesky links that are summoned using IP Masquerena. It does target, but it does just send to the grave, so we can get around her card effect destruction protection. In addition to our 2 Dreamweaver field spells, we're also running 1 copy of Primeval Planet's Perlino. It's basically the Tearlaments field spell. Those look pretty cool though. When it's activated, add a Tearlaments monster or Visa Starfrost from deck to hand. Fusion and Tearlament monsters we control gain 500 attack. It doesn't stack, so unfortunately, if you have a Tearlaments fusion, you don't get 1,000. You just get 500 if you are one or the other, at least. If a Tearlaments monster we control or in our graveyard is shuffled into the deck or extra deck, target and destroy a card on the field. Very nice. So in addition to giving a nice little boost and a search, it also provides some removal. Very handy. Next, we have 3 copies of Dreamweaver Phantasms. Absolutely max out on this. Whenever it's activated, we can add a Dreamweaver monster from deck to hand. So this is just 3 more copies of Neroy to start our plays. If Dreamweaver Joy is present in a field zone, all of our monsters get 500 attack. If Dreamweaver Terror is in a field zone, all of our opponent's monsters lose 500 attack and defense. So nice little way to stat boost there. Especially nice as there is a card that lets you put 1 Joy in a field zone and then a Terror in the opposite one. So you can easily get both of them lined up for Disciples effect and also get a nice 1,000 stat moving around. 500 to you and then 500 lost from your opponent. So they do come in handy. There is a way to easily set that up. 3 copies of Polymerization. Sorry that one of them has a different artwork. I ran out of copies of this artwork, but I like the original as well. Basically just fusion summon using materials from hand or field. Again, this is a nice way to just make stuff in a pinch, and this is also how we would make Dragoon, assuming a King of the Swamp is present on hand or field as well. Moving on to the Tearlament spells, we have 3 copies of Grief. basically emergency teleports a Tearlaments or Visa Starfrost from deck or grave, and then we send a monster we control the grave that has the same type or attribute as that summoned monster. Again, stuff like Rhino Heart and King of the Swamp can easily match either one pretty well. King of the Swamp obviously matches both, so it's an easy way to get our stuff moving around. Actually, most of the Tearlaments are dark attribute, so King of the Swamp would either match Rhino Heart for attribute or the Aquas for the type. If this card is ever sent to the graveyard by card effect, we can recover a banished Tearlaments trap back to our hand. Very handy. 2 copies of Tearlaments Scream. Honestly, you can bump down Grief if you want and bump up Scream as well. Definitely run no less than 2 copies, but definitely want to max out on it if you really need to. Monster is summoned and we control a Tearlaments monster or Starfrost. Mill the top 3 cards of our deck to grave, and then for the rest of the turn, our opponent's monsters lose 500 attack. If it's ever sent to the graveyard by card effect, it then searches a Tearlaments trap from deck to hand. Very handy. 3 copies of Left Arm Offering. Triple Tactics Thrust also works in this effect. If our opponent activates a monster effect, we can just grab a normal spell or trap that way, but Left Arm Offering also comes in handy. If we have 2 or more other cards in our hand, we banish our entire hand to grab a spell from deck to hand. Pretty much 9 times out of 10, it's going to be That Grass Looks Greener. Well, we've already used it. We can just grab other stuff like Pot of Prosperity or Foolish Barrel just to continue our plays. The only downside of Left Arm Offering is we cannot set spells and traps the turn we activated. So if we want to preserve our Prosperity, we can't set it to just keep it from being banished. We just have to activate it or just accept that we're going to lose it. And then for our one-off / targets, Foolish Barrel, send a monster from deck to grave. Pot of Prosperity, we banish 3 or 6 cards of our choice from the extra deck face down. For the rest of the turn, our opponent takes half damage. We can't draw cards by card effects we use Prosperity. But despite those downsides, we'll excavate cards from the top of our deck equal to what we banished, grab an excavated card to the hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of the deck in any order. This is just an alternative way to grab that grass. Banish 6, excavate 6. Hopefully we can find them in time. But the star of the show, That Grass Looks Greener. If you have more cards in your deck than your opponent does, we basically mill out from top of the deck so that our decks both have the same amount of cards. So if we have 60, your opponent has 40, we're sending 20 from deck to grave, straight off the top. Not always will your mills be in your favor with Tearlaments. Sometimes you'll hit 1 or 2 of the cards that can fusion summon, but don't have the other requirements. Other times you hit a bunch of King of the Swamps, and you don't have anything to utilize as the substitution. Again, if Kit Kalos ever comes back, absolutely max out on her as much as you can, or at least just run the 1 copy that's present everywhere else. And then also an instant fusion. It just helps make your plays go by faster, and definitely helps with at least protecting us if the grass doesn't go our way. Moving on to traps. For the Dreamir section, we have 3 Hypnagogia, 1 Fantasy. Hypnagogia, we take a Dreamir of Joy and Terror from hand or deck. 1 goes into our field zone, the other goes into the opponent's field zone. So this is how Phantasm and Disciple get their double effects off, just because both field spells are now present. Very handy that way. Nice little archetypal set rotation, and it is searchable thanks to stuff like Ikelos Sprite. Fantasy lets us recover 1 each of our banished Joy and Terror, and then if we do banish a card on the field, it also lets us banish itself from the grave to protect a Dreamir monster from battle or card effect destruction. So a nice way to recover those banished field spells. This is kind of a reason you don't need to max out on them, but I definitely recommend it. So if you are running less than 3 copies of the field spells, maybe bump this up to 2 or 3. But it's just a nice way to recover our field spells and also get a little bit of banishing ourselves. And then finally, rounding us out, we have the Tearlaments traps, 1 Meta Noise, 1 Salik, 1 Crime. May worth bumping up Tearlaments Salik, as it's also a monster searcher, but to each their own on how you want to split these guys. We'll start with Meta Noise. If we control a Tearlaments or the Starfrost, we basically Book of Moon an opponent's monster. Then we can send a Tearlaments monster from deck to grave. If it's ever sent to the graveyard by card effect itself, we can recover a Tearlaments monster from the graveyard. So again, if the Grass Mill didn't go in our favor and we just have a Shiren floating around, we can just recover her thanks to Meta Noise. Salik, Nice little effect negation on our opponent's monster if we control a Tearlaments or Starfrost. And if it's ever sent to the graveyard by a card effect, this is also another monster searcher from deck to hand. So worth bumping up to 2 or 3 if you want to get more searching off and don't really have access to the field spells, or if you just want to focus on the Dream Mirror ones, you can just bump up Seleeks and get your monster searches that way. And then finally, Crime for our counter trap. When a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated, of course, while we control the Tearlaments or Starfrost, we get to negate the activation and then shuffle that card into the deck. Then we send just any monster to the grave, similar to Shiren. So we don't necessarily have to send Tearlament stuff if we don't have access to it. We can just send out stuff like King of the Swamp to get more Aquas in grave that we can shuffle back. And then if it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, we can recover a banished Tearlaments monster. So if something like Allure of Darkness banishes our Shiren, we can just recover this way. Or if our opponent's got some shenanigans and they're trying to get rid of our stuff, like with Bestials, it's another way to get them back into the hand. And then, of course, use your Shiren plays from there. Whew! That's probably the most amount I've said Tearlaments and Dream Mirrors in a video. So hopefully we hit a world record with that. But in any case, I've been Sir Blackson97. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next year for a Dream Mirror profile, at least a newer one. But we'll see you in a little bit for the next regular deck profile. Peace out.